folks, and welcome back to Round Road and Needy. So, I'm wearing my NASA shirt from Walmart because we did a really fun activity this week based on the movie The Rocketeer. When was the first time you heard about the Rocketeer movie?
When you mentioned, let's watch The Rocketeer.
Yeah, pretty much. I hadn't heard it until a couple of other social media people had talked about it. The Rocketeer is making a comeback in a lot of Comic-Con costumes and things like that. And I was like, what is this Rocketeer that you speak of? So in case you don't know while watching this, The Rocketeer is a 1991 American period superhero film from Walt Disney Pictures. The film is based upon the character of the same name created by comic book artist and writer Dave Stevens. So in case you don't know the plot, because you don't know the movie, it is set in 1938, Los Angeles, California. It tells the story of a stunt pilot, Cliff Secord, who stumbles upon a hidden rocket-powered jetpack that he thereafter uses to fly without the need of an aircraft. His heroic deeds soon attract the attention of Howard Hughes and the FBI, who are hunting for the missing jetpack, as well as the Nazi operatives that stole it from Hughes.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, dun dun dun. The comic book writer Dave Stevens created The Rocketeer in 1982 and immediately viewed the character as an ideal protagonist for a film adaptation. Stephen Miner purchased the film rights from Stevens in 1983, but he strayed too far from the original concept, and the rights reverted to Stevens. Then, in 1985, he gave writers Danny Bilson and Paul DeMeo a free option on the Rocketeer rights. He liked their ideas for the Rocketeer. He felt they were heartfelt and affectionate tributes to the 1930s movie serials with all the right dialogue and atmosphere. Most people would approach my characters contemporarily, but Danny and Paul saw them as pre-war people. Principal photography for the Rocketeer lasted from September 19th, 1990 to January 22nd, 1991, which I feel like is pretty quick. I don't know that much about film stuff like that, but I know The Lord of the Rings took forever.
Yeah.
Filming at the Griffith Observatory took place in November 1990. The film ended up going 50 days over schedule due to weather and mechanical problems. Oops. The original production budget was set at $25 million, but rose to $35 million. This happened after Disney became impressed with the dailies. They realized this was a bigger movie than they were anticipating, and they approved the overages. It never got completely out of control. An abandoned World War II runway at the Santa Maria, California airport was the scene for the fictional Chaplin Airfield, and additional scenes were shot at Bakersfield. Okay, so I thought this was really interesting. Disney originally intended to change the Rocketeer's trademark helmet design completely. President Michael Eisner wanted a straight NASA-type helmet, but director Johnson threatened to quit production on the Rocketeer if he did that. Disney relented, but only after creating a number of prototype designs that were ultimately rejected by the filmmakers. Personally, I'm glad that they kept the original design. It's so iconic and feels like the 30s. The Rocketeer was released in the United States on June 21st, 1991, earning $9.6 million in its opening weekend in 1,616 theaters. The film opened number 4 behind Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, City Slickers, and Dying Young.
Oh, that's hard competition.
Rocketeer eventually grossed only $46.6 million in the U.S. box office, making it a commercial disappointment. Even though it was not a success in the box office in Disney's eyes, the film received positive reviews from critics. Based on 60 reviews collected by Rotten Tomatoes, 63% of the critics enjoyed The Rocketeer, with an average score of 5.94 out of 10. From the beginning of the process of making The Rocketeer, creator Dave Stevens and screenwriters envisioned it as the first entry of a trilogy. Disney in particular hoped that the film would carry a vein similar to the Indiana Jones franchise. Both Campbell and Connolly were contracted for sequels, Campbell for 2 more and Connolly for only 1. However, with the film's disappointing box office performance, plans for a sequel were halted in July of 1991. What would you have thought for a sequel? Would you have wanted one, not wanted one?
Yeah, they wrapped it up pretty good at the end of the movie. It was kind of a good one-off movie.
Yeah. sequels are never as good as the originals, in my opinion. And this one was pretty good, but I think it would have tanked. Overall, Rocketeer. Liked it, hate it, eh.
It was good. It was corny. A little bit cheesy here and there. So that was, but it was, I think it was kind of supposed to be. They didn't try, like, really hard not to make it corny.
Well, and it's based on a comic book, too, so
yeah.
Capturing some of the quirkiness that you find in a comic book and bringing it to the big screen, I think, is actually a really great achievement.
Yeah, they didn't try and go too serious, because, like, if they would have, they had to consider, the rudder on his head is going to make him steer. Well, what about the pressure of going that fast through the air and snapping your neck? Didn't think about that one, did you?
This is the engineer that I'm married to. I felt like the characters really played off each other very well, and the actors did a really great job doing that. There were very few small part characters. Everybody, I felt like, was pretty equally involved in the storyline, and so it was important for the actors to actually step up and get involved and react to several different, characters that were being put in the same scene.
That's true.
So if you get a chance to watch The Rocketeer, I would watch it. I think it's at least worth one watch, and I would be totally comfortable having our kids watch it.
Yep.
Routinely.
So for our activity, we kind of joined it together with a few things and went down to the Johnson Space Center and Space Center Houston to not only play off of the Rocketeer movie, but we also got to celebrate in the countdown to the 50th anniversary of Neil Armstrong's first steps on the moon, which was really cool.
It was amazing.
So we went down. I have family that is in Houston, so we visited with them, and then we all got together and went to the Space Center Houston. It was nuts because there was a lot of people there.
Yep.
So we had to park in a off-site location and get bussed over, which was hectic, and then go through lines, which were hectic, and then we got there and got through all the lines and stuff around like noon 15.
You say it was hectic. I mean, yes, there were lines and there was a lot of people, but I honestly felt like it was not a madhouse like I was expecting. Everybody was very polite, which is unusual for massive crowds, in my opinion. Everybody was very polite, very orderly. They had the buses moving as quickly as I felt like they were able to. And so, was it a little bit frustrating to have to wait for the bus that long? Yes, but once we got there, we got through the line pretty well. We were really worried about the bag situation because obviously with Reagan we had a lot of stuff, but it ended up being fine. We had bought clear bags because we read online the night before that we had to have a clear bag if we were going to have a large bag. So now we have a cute little backpack for Reagan. But yeah, so that part, while yes, it was a little bit frustrating, I think they handled it pretty well for the amount of crowds that they had. So once we got there, they had security, and then that part was like in the parking lot, and then they had like a tunnel that on the side of the tents were the banners like chronicling the space race and major moments leading up to the moon landing. When you went through that tunnel, on your left was like a family STEM zone tent, massive tent, and different companies and organizations had booths set up in there, and they had interactive activities for kids and adults. Reagan was a little bit too young for a lot of it, and then she ended up sleeping when we went anyway. That was really cool, but we skipped that at first and we went straight to the tram.
So they had 2 tram tours running for the general public tickets that were in there. One was to the training center where they had all the mock-up International Space Station modules and nodes that they would train in.
One thing I found really interesting about the training facility with all the mock-ups is when I was there in like 5th grade, that International Space Station was like 2 modules at that point or something, you know, and so they had a mock-up of the space shuttle in there back then, and like 2 pods, and now the International Space Station, they say, is now like the size of a football field in length, and the amount of capsules involved in that space station is nuts. Like, everywhere you looked, there was another capsule. And then interspersed within the capsule is like different stations. So they had like a sewing station and like a electrical, you know, wiring station, and, you know, a robot station where they're working on Robonaut, and, you know, all these different things just packed into that room. Mm-hmm. And that's the low fidelity training area. So that's like, to, you know, reference you guys in your training center, it's kind of like your paper cockpits but scaled up for NASA. And then there's even, you know, more high fidelity training in a different facility. So that was mind blowing, the amount of stuff in there.
So we did that one first, and then the second tram tour went to the current mission control rooms, and so we went up to the observation room for the International Space Station control room backup room.
Yes.
And listened to a speech about that and how that room is used and why they use it, when they use it, things like that. So right now it's mostly training, but if they ever have any issues or emergencies in the first room, or as time progresses and in the next 10 years that will become the main room, they will move to that room during those times.
So they're going to use that room for the Orion missions.
Yes.
Because they need the old room to maintain the International Space Station. So when the Orion project kicks off, that room that we were in is going to become the main room for the Orion project. So when we went through the tram tours, one thing that was really nice is we're members. So they have a member priority boarding for the trams, so we didn't have to wait in the long lines. So
nice.
we were able to get through both of those within like 2 hours. And then
less than that, hour and 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And they're 45-minute tours.
It's amazing. We did not get to do the historical mission control tour because that
like
day,
$300 a person.
Yeah, that day was only for VIP guests because it is the day of the moon landing. Then, so what we did after that was we went to Rocket Park. All the tram tours that day were leaving from Rocket Park, so we went into the big building with the Saturn V rocket, which, as many times as I've seen that, is still like, man. You look at that, you're just like, this thing is huge. And the new launch, the space launch system that they're building for the Orion project is almost as big as that rocket. Mm-hmm. It's crazy. So we sat in there for a while because it's air conditioned, and we ate some snacks, and you went around and found some stuff for a virtual geocache. Mm-hmm. And we took some pictures for that, and we read some plaques, and hung out and cooled off for just a little while. And then we went outside where they had a Apache helicopter. And you got to take a picture with the guy.
I did.
What'd you think?
Insert here.
What'd you think of a helicopter?
It's cool. I've never been that close to one. I got to look up and see what the cockpit looks like. It's a lot more cramped than it looks like from the outside. Mm. It was very hot. So, and there's a lot of glass, which means it's very hot inside probably until the AC gets going. But it was cool getting to talk to the guys. The lead guy for that specific aircraft was also an Aggie, so we talked to him for a little bit, which was kind of fun. They
did a really great job of just answering question after question after question, because you literally could like walk up and touch it. Mm-hmm. And so everybody wanted to crowd around, and I'm sure they asked the same questions over and over, like, what's this? What's this? What's this? And they were very gracious.
While standing in the sun in their full combat ready uniform.
Yeah. From there, we took a tram back to the Johnson Space Center, and that's when we did the family STEM zone. Ironically, not necessarily as a family, because your sister took Reagan to walk her around to help her fall asleep. But they had some really interesting things in there. When we walked in, there was a lot of virtual reality stuff available. There was like a golf on the moon experience that you could do. We didn't wait in line for that.
It was a very long line.
There was an obstacle course. Only vaguely able to get the idea about it, but you put on these special goggles and you took a fit training test. And it's a course that they use, it's a scaled down course for kids that mimics the same type of physical test that astronauts have to go through in order to pass their physical, training portion and prove that they're fit enough to be an astronaut. I don't remember what the glasses were for. I guess it was to make it harder.
Well, it limits your vision. It makes your vision go straight down. So
right.
Instead of looking out, when you are head up, you're looking at your feet the whole time.
Right. So it was fun. The kids were going through that course and getting to participate and do that. There was another kind of obstacle course like that had moon craters that you could do. Then they had a table, so there was an organization that runs all the tests basically and provides healthcare for astronauts. And so they had a bunch of spacesuit parts out, talking about the sleeping bag, talking about the cooling system, the diapers that they wear on extravehicular spacewalks. And it was really interesting because I got to actually talk to the lady, and I was like, I'm obviously not in this field right now, but I studied biochemistry. Like, all I hear about with the Mars stuff is we haven't figured out how to deal with the bone density issue while we're out in space for very long. How do you guys even test that? Because it's not like you put somebody on a scale and say, oh, you lost this. And they actually do it through a blood test. And it has to do with the pH of blood and stuff like that. So I thought that was really cool. And it was just really awesome to actually talk to somebody who actually does it. Talking to somebody that actually does it too, we got to do the Lockheed Martin table.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
And that was a VR. That was like the only VR thing that we did.
I had a virtual reality experience where you were in the shuttle, you took off, you flew past the International Space Station and the moon, you landed on Mars, you got to look around a little bit, and then they shot you back to Earth really quick, and then you got to experience the free fall through atmosphere and the parachute deploying and then landing in the water.
And I guess they developed that for the Super Bowl when it was in Houston?
Yeah, I guess so.
And apparently there was actually you were strapped in with a rig and did the drop down?
Yeah, when you came into the atmosphere, there was an 80-foot drop that you would experience while you were watching, which would be kind of cool.
That was nuts. It was really entertaining too because your parents did the virtual reality thing with us. Yeah, I mean, we all looked like idiots with these goggles on, but it was really cool. The other thing that was really cool was they had a ginormous 3D printed model of a Saturn V rocket. That was very impressive. They said they used 6 miles of filament to print that thing. I just wanted, and they didn't know, the person that was there was just a volunteer and he didn't know what kind of 3D printer they used. I really wanted to know. An
expensive one.
Yeah, because the detail work on it was amazing.
And it wasn't even sanded, really. It was just all straight print.
The other thing that was 3D printed was the Orion capsule at the Lockheed Martin table. And I got to talk to some other fellow nerds and ask them how they paint said 3D print model because they didn't have any print lines on the outside of their model. And I really wanted to know how they did it. The one guy suggested nail polish. So I'll have to see if that works. There was just so much going on there. You could make your own rocket and shoot it with a jet of air. There was arts and crafts of other kinds. From there, we went into the actual Johnson Space Center, main building. They have a lot of exhibits.
Space Center Houston.
Space Center Houston. Anyway, in that main building, there are so many exhibits. It's difficult to do all of them. Back area was dedicated to the Mars excursions and the Orion project.
I couldn't get a rocket to successfully launch with the right supplies.
Yeah, you kept putting the supplies on the wrong side. There was so much else going on. They had a giant model of the SLS, the Space Launch System. They had a model capsule of the Orion capsule. And they had kind of a timeline of all the different major milestones to get to Mars. And one thing that was really interesting in the controls center when we went on the tram tour was they were talking about how they're working with Boeing and SpaceX right now to bring manned spaceflight launches back to the United States so that we don't have to be reliant on Russian rockets anymore. And they're aiming to be done with that by the end of this year. That boggled my mind. And then they're talking about getting to the moon within the next 5 years. I never thought I would have people on the moon in my lifetime.
Ta-da.
Ta-da! It's a good time to be alive! Your family ended up leaving after that. And they took Reagan with them so that she could actually sleep. She's so sleep deprived. Poor baby. But then you and I stayed because they were doing a concert that night to celebrate the actual landing on the moon. I thought it was going to be like in the middle of a field somewhere. No, it's in the parking lot.
This was a little warm at first.
Yeah. But it was really cool. Everybody got these light up bracelets. And so as the concert was going, they would interact with the music or with whatever was going on. They had some really interesting videos interspaced as well. They had like different messages from like Congress people and astronauts on the International Space Station. And
that had just docked within the hour.
Yeah. That was really cool. Philip Phillips was the warm-up guy.
Just the opener.
We obviously love the one song, Home by him. That was his most popular. But his band can jam.
They were really good.
And then after that, they brought Walk the Moon out for like a couple of songs. They were the headliner. And then they did the countdown.
Houston, we are go for touchdown. 10,
go for landing. 12
9,
Roger, 12
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap.
I thought their concert was great. They are fabulous musicians. Their stuff is...
They're fun to watch.
It's fun to watch and you want to dance.
And some people did.
And a lot of people did. And then, yeah, it was a really great concert. We positioned ourselves to be at the front of the massive people to get back to the buses. We didn't have to wait too long. We had a pretty good system set up. Overall, I thought it was a really awesome experience. I was really glad that we went. I was really glad the crowds weren't as bad as I was expecting.
It was a lot of fun. Tram tours were really cool. The exhibits were well done.
So if you get the chance, go to the NASA Space Center in Houston and do all the Johnson Space Center tours. It's really fascinating and it really gives you an idea of all the amazing and exciting things we have in space exploration to come in our lifetime.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you guys for watching and we'll see y'all real soon. Bye.